What's up, everybody? Axe Wizard here, back with another video on my favorite tabletop RPG system, Cairn, specifically the second edition. And today we're delving into the Warden's Guide. The Warden's Guide has been available for quite a while, but I've been consuming it in small doses, bits and pieces here and there. For those unfamiliar of what second edition is, or even what Cairn is, Cairn started out as just a small little Zine, basically. It's a classless role-playing system. It's a D20 roll under, and it's very simple. There's only like 3 or 4 pages of actual rules in here, and what it boils down to is basically, as the Warden or the DM or the GM, whatever system you're coming from, how it works is, from the player's perspective, is the player just has to tell me what they want to do, and if there's a reason why they should be able to do it, they just do it. And it's more dependent on the inventory, a lot less like classes and skills and stuff like that. So it sounds like it might be restrictive, but in a weird way, it's actually, for me and the people I play with, it's yielded a lot of crazy things that I don't think they would have thought of under a more defined system, such as Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition or something like Pathfinder 2nd edition, right? So, 2nd edition of Cairn keeps a lot of those same rules. The rules themselves are still only like 4 or 5 pages, except everything else in Cairn goes to it lends itself more to long-term campaigns, whereas most people think Cairn, it's only good for like a one-shot or something, short. Second edition expands upon first edition and adds so many more things, and it has a lot of these cool things called procedures, which are modular. They are optional. They are things that you can use or you can choose not to. You can even just use some of like the second edition features, such as backgrounds, which I just bought my microphone, sorry. I've done lots of videos on backgrounds, but realistically, it's still backwards compatible with first edition, which I think is amazing. So the Warden's Guide is, think of it like the Dungeon Master Manual or whatever for D&D, right? It's the tools for the Warden or the GM to make the worlds come to life and all that stuff. So, as you can see, I included the table of contents in here. We're not going to go through the entire Warden's Guide today. We're just going through the world building aspect of it. And we're not even going through the entire world building stuff. This is just the high level first few pages of it. But there's lots of things in here. There's everything for creating a world, dungeons, forests. There's a bestiary for monsters. There's guides on how to create your own monsters. There's even naming procedures to help you generate randomized names for things. And you could get some pretty comedic results, which we'll go into later. There's also a section that I really want to go into probably very soon about growth in the system, because Cairn is also different in the fact that you're not, killing enemies and getting experience points and leveling up that way. You're not even leveling up. There are no levels, right? So how do you progress? What keeps the players engaged and interested? Because some players are just like, I like number go up. Number go up, I do more damage, I roll more dice, I feel stronger, and those are valid things. Cairn takes a bit of a different approach. So there's also a bunch of spell books. There's like Reliquary, which is like magical items and stuff. There's also advice on how to create your own backgrounds, creating point crawls, and there's a frequently asked questions section that also gives examples of play, which is really handy for people who want to, start being a warden for this system. And also there's something on the setting of Vald. Vald is the setting for Cairn, and it gives you more insight about that. So today we're going into just the world building and procedures for generating your own settings, maps, factions, dungeons, and forests, right? And I'm not even touching on the dungeons and forests part. This is already going to be probably a long video as it is. So, a few quick notes. I realized once I had prepared this video that I was using an outdated early backer PDF. There have since been revisions that were done before the final prints of the Warden's Guide. So I'm using the July 2024 revision for the purposes of the slides and stuff here, but not too much has changed. I caught a few things, but I might have missed some. So if you're trying to follow step by step in your own Warden's Guide and then you see something is not the same as it is on the video or it's on your Warden's Guide, that's why. I'm using an older version. Go by what you have. So, setting seeds. So, again, this is a procedure. So in second edition, a procedure is an optional thing. You can choose to do this or you cannot. You can choose to do it in its entirety, or you can pick bits and pieces that you like and use them, right? That's the nice thing about Cairn, is that it's still that lightweight system of the first edition that everyone grew to love. And for people like me who don't have a lot of spare time and don't want to get bogged down in the rules, don't worry about it. You can choose to use or not use whatever you want. As long as it's fine with you and your players, live it up, right? So this following procedure is designed to help create the seed of a setting, the unique topography, natural features, people, and the paths that an adventuring party encounter as they travel throughout a region. We'll start by developing the people that live there, their ambitions and resources, then the factions that affect them. Then we'll generate the terrain of your region, followed by its various points of interests, which are denoted as POI, landmarks, roads, trails, and so on. As with any other rule, if you don't like a table result, roll again or tweak as desired. So awesome. So right away, the whole purpose of this procedure is that it takes Cairn from the first edition to where, if you're not an experienced GM like myself, I'm not saying that I'm experienced. I'm saying that I'm the unexperienced one. I tried running some D&D and some Pathfinder games, and I kept getting bogged down in the rules, and my players got bored. I was not very good at it, okay? And one thing that drew me to Cairn is that I didn't have to do a lot of preparation. I could just wing up one-shots and then have a blast. And when it comes to trying to do longer campaigns with the Cairn system, these procedures help you flesh out a living, breathing world. And I was a bit skeptical at first because I tried to do a few different things, and I'm like, well, how good can it be from just rolling from tables and stuff like that? But it doesn't. It gets you about 80% of the way there, and then you have to tie it all together and then make it make sense. So it's not like I can just click a button and then I have an entire world that's going to make sense, right? But this makes it so much easier to create a world. And after going through this process, oh man, I'm pumped. I have a setting created that I'm going to be using very, very soon. And I'm hoping that I'll be able to actually make some Cairn gameplay videos as well. I have somebody who is interested in doing that. He's currently sick right now, though, so I hope he feels better. So the realm and regions. A realm is a general term for a related collection of regions, potentially encompassing hundreds of places for the player characters to visit and interact with. So if you look at my little sweet drawing I did over here in MS Paint, basically, a realm can have several regions, and then every region has their own people, and then you can have several different factions that are all doing this. And the realm technically even could be its own faction as well, like whatever ruling stuff you have. But we'll get into that later. For now, the whole idea of Cairn is that you want to keep it small, because adventures don't happen in big, like countries. They happen in small towns where you're in the here and now. This helps you create that, but also you can create a higher level overarching real breathing world that actually has consequences and can react to what players do, which is really, really cool. So the materials required, it says this. I just cheated. I just grabbed my dice, and then I I rolled them on a piece of paper, but I didn't use paper. I used basically MS Paint. So you'll see my very crappy map here in a few. But at least 1d6 and d20, but 6d6 or 2d20 would be ideal. So I had several different dice. I think I had 8d6 and I had several d20s, but it's all good. You can even use a dice rolling app or something if you don't have any dice handy. It's fine. So, region theme, the people. The most important aspect of a region is its people, their character, ambitions, and the resources that tie them to this land. Roll on the culture and resources tables and then note the results in your notebook. So you can see here, you got 2 tables. So I just rolled 2d20 and I had like a green and a red one. And I was like, okay, the green one's going to be first. The red one's going to be the second result. I ended up rolling double 19s. So for the character of these people, they are wealthy. For the ambition of these people, unification. What does that mean? Well, that's up to you to tie it all together. It gives you something. As always, if you don't like a result, you can re-roll it. However, I would wait. Wait until you have everything created before you really start re-rolling stuff. Unless something just doesn't make sense. But give it a shot and then roll on these tables later as you go. And you'll be surprised at how there are many things that you wouldn't have thought of before that make total sense once you tie it all together. And it's like, oh my God, this is so much more immersive and in-depth now. And it feels like it's not just some fake made-up place. It feels like it could be a real fantasy setting, which is awesome. And then for the resources, I rolled a 14 and a 2. So the abundance of a resource they have is textiles. And then the scarcity of a resource they have is fuel. Okay, so what I did is I just made a note of this on my computer. I just had like a little notepad open and I was kind of jotting this stuff down as I went. If you are doing it pen and paper, just have a separate sheet and just make notes of all this stuff. Highly recommend doing it in pencil in case you want to change your mind. So now that we have the region theme, now we can start working on factions. So a region is typically dominated by one or more factions, each with their own unique advantages, agenda, and obstacles. Each faction should also have one or more representatives or agents, tasked with helping complete the agenda. Smaller regions with fewer points of interests have 1 to 2 factions, while larger regions could have as many as 5 or 6. For the purposes of this video, and for now, I'm only doing 1 faction for now. And I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, to be honest, and I'm excited to make more factions, but at this point in time, I don't need to make more factions. Because this is the cool thing about the world building part, is that you don't have to start with a massive ass area. You can just start with just 1 region. And that'll probably keep the players engaged in there for many sessions. Unless you give them something that they want to go outside, or maybe they just hate the area, then you can make another region and they can travel there. But you can roll all this up on the fly. You don't have to have it done before you even start the game. You can just roll up 1 region and then you're pretty good for a few play sessions. Hell, even for an entire campaign, possibly. So, agents. Agents are often in charge of completing one or more of the goals of the agenda of a faction. Particularly large factions may have additional agents, each in charge of a distinct goal. Agents may have personal motivations that differ from the faction's main agenda, a fact that canny player characters can exploit for their own gain. So agents are basically NPCs, non-player characters that belong to a faction. They help advance the agenda of a faction. All this stuff is going to make sense here, but this is just giving you the high-level overview of like what makes a faction, right? Advantages. Factions possess advantages that assist them in accomplishing their agenda. Advantages reflect a faction's influence, materials, wealth, and other unique features. Factions leverage their advantages as much as possible when trying to achieve their goals, and at the same time continually work to acquire more advantages. So advantages are a neat thing. I'm not going to touch on them too much right now because it'll be more clear once we see the tables and we start rolling on this stuff. But then let's talk about agendas. Factions will work to complete their agendas independently, enlisting the help of player characters only when that would strengthen their agenda. Agendas are defined by a series of 3 to 5 goals that build toward a clear objective. Goals are progressive, building on the previous successes or failures of earlier goals. Goals should focus on acquiring a distinct advantage in order to proceed to the next goal. At least one goal should deal with the faction's primary obstacle. This may be the first goal or the last. All agendas have at least one obstacle that stands in the way of their completion. Additional obstacles can arise through faction actions or through developments in the fictions, such as players being assholes, which is something that players are famous for. Completing a faction's agendas should be a significant event, potentially changing the political or natural landscape of a region. So the region map should continually reflect the impact of factions as they work on completing their agendas and acquiring more advantages. So all this stuff just gives you a high level. It might not make sense right now, but it'll probably start making sense once we start rolling on the tables and everything. So let's take a look at that. So the tables that we get to roll on is, first is your faction type. So you get to roll on the type and also the agent. So the type that I rolled was 2 commoners. Okay. And then the agent that we have is a gravedigger. Okay. Seems kind of weird for this to be a faction and a bunch of wealthy people, but I tied it all together. You'll see. So faction traits. What's their first trait? I rolled an 18 for secretive. And then the trait 2 is that they're bankrupt. So already this gives me some ideas. I'm not going to try fleshing them together right now. I'm going to follow this process and then tie it all together, and it's actually pretty cool. So let's talk about faction advantages. On this one, you just roll 2d20 for the first number of advantages that the faction has, then for the type of advantages. So you can see here, the first d20 I rolled, I had a 13, which gives me 3 total advantages. So then I roll a d20 3 times on this type table. So you can see I've got an apparatus, fealty, and resources. What does this stuff mean? You'll see. Just wait. That's one thing that's kind of nice about Cairn, is that nothing is strictly defined. So if you're coming from a system that's like from Pathfinder 2nd edition or D&D 5th edition, to where there are huge ass rule books that define everything, Cairn is a more rulings not rules kind of system. So it just gives you stuff to just get your creative juices flowing, and then you make it your own and you tie it all together how you see fit. So an apparatus could be something like, oh, they have a big super weapon, or maybe they have like a drill or something like that that's used to get a precious resource or whatever, right? Fealty could mean, I don't know, maybe a different ruling faction actually is fealty to them, or it might even be something to where people swear fealty to them, right? That could be an advantage for the faction. Resources, maybe they have some resources that a different faction doesn't, or something that would be an advantage for them as they go to further their own agendas and goals, right? So now we can talk about the faction agendas. So you can see here, roll 1d20 for each column and combine. So I rolled a d20 for the agenda. I got 7. So their agenda is to enrich themselves, which makes sense because of that bankrupt trait, right? And then the obstacle, I rolled a 14, which contravenes an established code with a heavy penalty. So contravene basically just means like to come in conflict with, right? There's a conflict of some sort. So the reason, the obstacle why they can't enrich themselves is because they can't rob people, because it's against the law to rob people, right? That's an obvious one, but there's other ideas that you can have for it, and you'll see kind of what I went with here as we go to further do this here. So as always, I'm just writing all this stuff down so you can see like my little notes here about what I'm doing, and it's very handy as we just go through this here. So then it gives you like a little example faction. And this kind of confused me a little bit because they already had like an agent defined. So like Horatia Confi, first of her order, recovered the map of the dead for the guild. Willpower 15. I haven't gotten to roll an agent yet, so I don't know why this is here. And I don't recommend trying to make your faction make sense right now because we still have yet to roll the region. We don't know like what the map is. We don't know like what the environment gives us and all this stuff. Those tie in heavily to the people and also the factions. So I don't recommend kind of trying to tie it all together right now. I recommend just keeping your notes and then just keep following along the process. So faction rules. By default, factions operate independent of the player character's actions. If the player characters do nothing, the factions should still act to achieve their aims. The Warden should rely on the fiction to determine whether a faction is positioned to advance their agenda. Some goals may be time sensitive or depend on explicit circumstances. At other times, it might be more appropriate to introduce a new goal after a major event, alliance, or friction between one or more of the factions. Whenever a faction is positioned to advance a goal in their agenda, roll a d6 on the faction actions table. If the two factions are opposed, the faction most at risk makes a willpower save, using the score of its highest ranking agent. On a fail, the faction does not roll on the faction actions table at this time. So you don't have to use this yet, but this is something that you can do like as your sessions go on and you want the world to be a living, breathing world. These are things that you can do, like whatever factions you've created and introduced, or even factions that you haven't introduced to the players yet that might still have a hand in this. Between the sessions, behind the scenes, during downtime, whatever, you can still go through your factions and you can basically role play your factions. Like, okay, am I going through and am I doing my agenda? All that stuff. I'm gonna crack open a drink here. Sorry about that. Oh, that's good. All right. So, nothing to worry about now, but something to keep in mind for later, especially as you start getting a larger world. This can be quite fun to see how factions interact with one another. But for now, I recommend just keeping it small. One or two factions. They don't even have to be opposed necessarily. But yeah, so this is how like the master game is played, right? Behind the scenes as the Warden, you are controlling the world, the puppet strings of all the non-player characters. They are all the NPCs are your player characters as the Warden. So now we can get into the topography. So this was actually a pretty cool thing. I haven't done something like this before, but then again, just because I have this YouTube channel and I make content about a tabletop RPG doesn't mean I'm good at it. Right? Doesn't mean I'm like some awesome guy. I'm not like Professor Dungeon Master or Bob World Builder or Matt Mercer from Critical Role. Or Brennan Lee Mulligan from Dimension 20. Right? I don't know. I've had an interest in role playing games for a long time, but I've played a few. But again, I'm just trying to figure things out, same as everybody else. So don't think I'm like the authority on all this stuff. I'm just a guy who enjoys this stuff and just trying to make some fun experiences for my kids and also some of my friends. So, all right. So the topography, this is really cool. I like this section. This is when I started getting kind of excited about it. Because so far, like all the factions and the region and all that stuff, I'm like, okay, this is all kind of abstract stuff, but I don't know what to do with it yet. But then the topography is where it all starts really coming together. So a region's terrain and natural features are an essential part of any map, affecting the local history, resources, settlements, culture, and more. Landmarks are unique, visible points of interest that can also be used as a geographic reference points my God, redo that, sorry. Landmarks are unique, visible points of interest that can also be used as geographic reference points. Towers, mountains, tall buildings, and so on. They help orient travelers around the map and are especially visible from all areas with a higher elevation or a clear viewpoint. Landmarks are represented on the map by a triangle. So, how we're going to do this is it shows us in detail here. I'm not going to read this right now. We're going to break it down step by step, but you can kind of see like what they're recommending. You're going to roll some dice on a map that kind of determines where things are. You're going to draw some lines. It's going to be cool, right? So let's go to the first step. The first step is to roll 1d6, then roll an amount of dice equal to that. So in my case, I rolled a 3. So I'm going to roll 3d6 on a piece of paper. So I did that. I rolled it over here. And then you can see what I did here is I basically just rolled it, right? And then, so going back, collect any dice that roll off the page and then set them aside for now. So if you have like 6 dice and you rolled them and then 2 of them went off the page, just move those aside for now. We will use those in a bit. In my case, I only rolled 3 and all 3 of them were on the page, so we're good to go. So you can see here I had a 1 here, a 6 here, and a 4 here. So note the face-up result for each die, then use the terrain die drop table to mark the terrain type on the map. For example, a die showing a 4 would indicate tough terrain. So you can see here, this 1 through 3, this is easy terrain. This 4 falls in the 4 to 5 range, so it's tough. And then this 6 is perilous terrain. So I did that. I just wrote what they are, right? Draw long curvy lines across the page, carving up the map around each die. So this is where you can just start kind of fleshing out what your regions are. So I just drew like some little swirly lines around here, and I was like, okay, I want the easy place to be kind of larger, because tough and perilous could be pretty rough for like a brand new adventuring party. I don't know. So I just wanted the easy one to be larger. So you can see I kind of encroached on the perilous a bit more, and then I probably could have came down here even farther, but I left the tough kind of open. And there you go. Now we have rough regions. Pretty cool, right? So now we get to roll D20 for each column and then combine. So for my easy one, I rolled a D20. I got a 15. So they're going to be plains. And then the landmark in this region, I rolled a 7. It's going to be a fallen column. Okay. What does that mean? We have yet to find out. For the tough terrain, I rolled a d20. I got 19, so it's going to be tundra. And then the landmark is a behemoth graveyard. The hell does that mean? We'll figure it out, baby. Perilous. I rolled a d20, and I got 10 for gorges. Okay. And then the landmark is a titanic rib cage. Cool. So the instructions here says roll on the appropriate table for each result, writing the terrain and landmark results on the map. Replace the die with a triangle, writing the landmark result on the map. If there are any empty spaces in the map in need of terrain, roll a die anywhere you like and use the face-up result as before. So I already had my map the way I wanted it, so I didn't make any more regions, or I didn't make any more terrain. And then I just followed their instructions, which just said to basically pick up the dice and put a triangle where the a dice was. And then I just wrote this information here for now. This is all stuff that you should do it in pencil, because you're going to be erasing it and changing things later on. So now, rivers, seas, and lakes. Every region should have some kind of water source. Otherwise, where would the locals get their drinking water or receive news from the rest of the realm? To create waterways, draw a wiggly line from the highest elevation point, example mountains, to the lowest, such as grasslands. If the river runs through a terrain that is higher in elevation, it might terminate in a lake. If your map has a sea, it might terminate there. Otherwise, a river can continue off the map page. Holy cow, I can't talk today. So you can see here I drew in blue, naturally, because it's water, right? I figured, so the high point would be these gorges here, right? I figured that would be the highest elevation. So I started here. I have like a little lake here, and then I just drew kind of down here, and I figured the plains would be a nice place to have that go through. I kind of touched on the tundra and then went back in the plains with a second fork here. So I was pretty happy with how this turned out. I liked it. Made sense. So now let's talk about the weather. The weather can have a great impact on the people, culture, and the terrain of a region. It impacts what kinds of clothes the adventurers need to wear, what sorts of tools they'll have to bring, and how tough their journey will be. To determine the average weather on a region, roll on the seasonal weather table once for each season. Optionally, you may also roll on the unusual weather table around particular landmarks or terrain. So we will get to that unusual weather table here in just a second. Let's focus on the seasonal weather. So for every one of these terrains that we got, I'm starting with plains, easy terrain. For the weather, I rolled a 6. So it's going to be cold and rainy in the spring. In the summer, it's going to be sweltering and humid. In the fall, it's going to be chilly and stormy. And in the winter, it's going to be freezing and hailing. So right away, the plains for 3 out of the 4 seasons are going to be cold. I'm like, okay. That definitely affects some things, for sure. For the tundra, which I always assume is like, oh, the frozen tundra, right? That's the only time I hear the word tundra is like accompanied by frozen or frigid, right? So for tundra, I rolled a 1. So during the spring, it's mild and sunny. During the summer, it's hot and sunny. During the fall, it's nice and breezy. And during the winter, it's mild and clear. So I'm like, okay, that doesn't sound like any tundra I've ever been in. But then again, I'm not a freaking geography expert. But I'm down to make it work. So cool. And then for the gorges, I rolled weather 5. So you can see it's going to be cold and windy, hot and humid, cool and rainy, and then freezing and snowing in the winter. So the majority of my region is going to be cold. It's going to be pretty cold. Even the tundra, I can still swing it to be cold, right? The summer, it might be hot, but for most time, I can still swing it to be somewhat chilly, but not as cold as the plains and the gorges. So that's my game plan going forward. But as always, I could have decided to swap. Like, for example, I could have decided the plains have the weather 1. I could have just re-rolled it. You know, I might not have agreed with this. It might not have made sense, but I decided to go with it to see where it would take me, and I'm kind of glad I did, because you'll see when I tie it all together how it turned out. It's pretty cool. So then you can roll on the unusual weather table for your landmarks. So for the plains, the landmark I rolled was flashes of movement in the periphery that always amount to nothing. So this is the unusual weather for that landmark. So I just imagine like this fallen column, like this probably pretty titanic one, considering that other landmarks are a behemoth graveyard and a titanic ribcage. So I was like, is there like an older like race of giants or something that was around here? So there's like this huge fallen column, right? And then whenever you go there, there's flashes of movement in the periphery that always amount to nothing, which would be super immersive. And as a player, if I'm like, I would get bad vibes from this place for sure. And maybe it could spawn like some local legends among the people. See, world building. It's all coming together yet, and we haven't even really got there yet. Isn't it awesome? So for the behemoth graveyard, rolling dust clouds that smell of cinnamon. The coughing lasts long after they've moved on. Interesting. And then for the gorges, for the Titanic ribcage landmark, distant chimes instead of thunder. A smoky, sweet wind blows in from the west. Okay, cool. Why does it do that? Who the hell knows? Maybe you can make some cool quest or something like that. Or maybe there's a reason for it. Maybe one of the factions messed something up. Or maybe whatever is going on with the previous denizens who used to live here, there's all sorts of things you could extrapolate from that, right? I could spend all day talking about the possibilities. It's awesome. For now, just write it down on your notes, and then we'll continue on. And already you can see how just this process starts sparking all these ideas that you probably wouldn't have thought of by yourself. Not that you're not an imaginative person, but it exposes you to things you might not have thought of, and which also sort of, for me anyway, it sparks new ideas, and it really gets those creative juices flowing, and that's why I really like this process. And yeah, so let's continue on. So you can see it gives on the left here, the Warden's Guide gives us some like diagrams of what they're talking about. Now you can see on figure 4 here, they start like drawing in actual terrain and stuff like that. I don't recommend doing that yet, and you'll see why. But you can see here on figure 3, they kind of put what their landmark is. They didn't put the triangles on it like they said, but hey, whatevs. On my map, I decided to actually draw what the landmarks are. So you can see here in the plains, I have this giant fallen column that like broke or whatever, and it's like fallen, okay? Down here in the tundra, I have a behemoth graveyard. So I drew like a little cheesy little graveyard here, right? You can kind of see it over my balding head. You can see my bald spot from here. Holy cow. Man, stress at work is no joke. So, and then over here, you can see the Titanic rib cage, right? So the map is slowly coming together. So now let's work on our points of interest. Points of interest on a map, or POIs as it's abbreviated, are generally divided into the following categories. Number 1 is the heart, the primary settlement in a region. It isn't necessarily the largest or the most important place, but it should always be significant to the region's history and people. Second is settlements. Permanent, largely self-sufficient population centers, typically governed by a political body or a faction. Waypoints, a safe place to refill supplies, get a good night's sleep, or get directions. 4, curiosities, a wilderness locale of note, somewhere remarkable or strange. It might indeed be hazardous, but only if the player characters interact with it. 5, layers, an enemy encampment, hive, or a source of heightened monster activity. Layers are different than dungeons. I don't know what the difference is yet, but we're going to get into it as I read this damn thing, I swear to God. 6, dungeons, an explicitly dangerous locale, dungeon or adventure site. So, cool. Judging by their 6 things here, we're probably going to be rolling a d6 or 2, don't you think? So, it gives us these steps here for the draw points of interest. Step number 1 here is to draw a letter H close to a water source on the map. So I thought that, you know what, like right here, this fork of this main like river here, this would be a great spot for the main settlement, or the heart of the region. And it's like right in the plains. I figure you're going to be there a lot, so it seemed like a good spot to me. I could have put it here, I could have put it somewhere else, but I figured right here is a perfect spot. That's where I decided to put it. So that's where I did. And then it says roll. So this is one of those mistakes I caught with me using an outdated version. So I kind of modified it on the screenshot here. You can see on the old one, it says roll 1d6, blah, blah, blah. You want to roll 3 to 8 d6 on the map. So I think I ended up rolling 7 or so. I think that's what I grabbed. Collect any dice that roll off the page and set them aside for now. So you see I rolled them on the map, and I didn't draw the boxes of the dice this time around because I was lazy, my bad. But I did draw the numbers that they had and where they approximately were where I rolled them, okay? So I did that. So note the face-up result for each die, and then use the point of interest die drop table to mark the type of point of interest on the map. For example, a die showing a 4 would indicate a layer denoted by the letter L. So you can see I just went with C for curiosity, L for layer, D for dungeon. I didn't roll any waypoints or settlements. So I was like, should I re-roll one? But I was like, you know what? It's my first time doing this. I'm going to trust the dice. We're going to go with it. And I'm glad I did. So I've got, let's see, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 curiosities. I got 2 dungeons and a lair. So there's plenty of stuff to explore on this map. So super cool. So I did that. And now it says roll any dice that fell off the map page, repeating the last step until none remain. So I rolled 7 dice. They all went on the page. I didn't have to do this, but if you did, you can just grab your dice, roll it, and do the same previous steps for, you know, what you got to do. So it should be pretty painless. So starting with the heart, number each point of interest on the map. So it says to do this, but then in later steps, the heart was never numbered. It was just always denoted as the heart. Everything else started off numbered. So the heart, I guess, is number 0. Like if you're a programmer, it's a 0 indexed array, right? So there's no order. I just went with whatever I wanted. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to number the heart. I'm going to go to this curiosity 1, this dungeon 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I denoted them all. Like I guess I rolled 8 dice. Cool. So yeah, I rolled, yep. So I just numbered them. That's all I did here. So now you can roll on the relevant tables for each point of interest, including the heart and all landmarks. Note the results in your notebook. So I didn't roll any settlements other than the heart, so I didn't include the settlements table here. But I don't know if I show that or not. But it's in the Warden's Guide. So you can see here, it gives us like tons of options for curiosities, for layers, for dungeons. They have us roll the type, like what the curiosity is and what feature it has. So layer and feature, and then dungeon type and feature. So super cool. So I did that. And I also kind of updated my map to have like some art on it. So on my little notepad, the heart, the type of it was a stronghold. And then the feature is that it moves or revolves. So I was like, oh my God, that'd be awesome to have like a stronghold that like it just rotates like by magic or whatever. I would have never thought of that. And it has like these bridges that go here, and maybe you can only actually exit the city like once or twice a day or something like that. Like whenever the things meet the bridges. I'm like, oh, that's so freaking cool. So I did that. So I drew a very like elaborate freaking stronghold here. Look at that. That is amazing. Ooh, I should take art commissions. No, I'm kidding. For the first curiosity here, it's echoing fields, and the feature is impossible music. Okay, so I drew like some fields with like a freaking sound icon or something on there. Yeah, so you can see I just went through here and did this for all. So for the point of interest number 2, which is a dungeon, it's a fort, and it's floating. And I forgot to draw it floating because I'm an idiot. But hey, kind of, or maybe this is floating. You don't know. For the third curiosity, it's an enormous footprint, and the feature is that it's an ancient trash heap, or ancient trash heap. So I decided to just draw like a puppy paw, like a I don't know if it's a dog or a cat or whatever. Just drew some toe beans, right? And then maybe like this is just the local trash heap where people just throw garbage away. I don't know. Or it's an ancient trash heap. So maybe you can find some cool ancient loot here. Who knows? For point of interest 4, another curiosity, it was buried megalith. I don't know what the hell a megalith is, but the feature is that it has carnivorous plants. So that sounds dangerous. For feature number 5, which is a dungeon, I rolled laboratory, and it's buried. So I drew like a buried dome with like a satellite dish on top or something. I don't know. It could be whatever it is, right? For the 6th curiosity, or for the 6th point of interest, which is a curiosity, it was a cracked bell, and the feature is celestial mirror. So I'm not sure what to do about that yet, but that's really cool and intriguing. For point of interest number 7, which is also a curiosity, I rolled purple geysers, and the feature is that they are illusory. So I drew like some purple geysers. I think it's purple. I'm colorblind, so we'll see if it worked. And then for the 8th point of interest, the layer, primitive bridge. And the feature is symbiotic entity. So that's exciting. Cool. So there you go. I spruced up my map a little bit, starting to look kind of exciting. I already have lots of mystery and intrigue and things that the players are going to want to investigate. Hell, they're going to... You're telling me that you don't want to go check out a floating fortress or echoing fields that have impossible music or a buried megalith with its carnivorous plants or purple geysers? Man, come on. This is awesome. So now we're going to work on generating the paths. Paths act as geographic connectors on the map, ranging from well-traveled roads and trails to rough wilderness routes. Paths should provide compelling choices between points of interest, where factors such as safety, speed, and travel difficulty must be weighed. Okay. Must be weighted, sorry. Path types, we have standard. Paths are obvious or well-trod routes between 2 points of interest, represented by a thick line. Hidden paths do not appear on any known maps. Their discovery always requires some kind of cost, represented by a dashed line. Conditional. Paths may be blocked or require specialized tools, boats, climbing gear, etc. to cross. Others may even be impossible to navigate without a map or a guide, represented by a cross line. So draw paths. So what it had us do is starting with the heart, create 1 to 4 paths between each location. So I don't think I followed the steps very well here, because the way that this reads to me, I should have drew from the heart, I should have drew a direct line to the echoing fields. And then from the heart, it should have gone directly to, the floating fortress over here. Instead, I drew roads kind of how I would imagine them based on the terrain. So you have multiple roads leading out of the heart of the place, which is this big revolving fortress, the stronghold. So I figured there might be a moat around it, and then maybe you could only leave certain times a day. So there's basically three roads that go out from the heart, but the roads themselves aren't point A to point B. They kind of they kind of just meander like roads really do. So I don't know if this is good or bad. It kind of made sense when I did it, but so you could see there's these straight lines here. These are I think what does it say, standard roads, and the dotted ones are hidden, and then the ones that have an X through them, I drew a red X on them. They're not passable for whatever reason. So say for example, this road over here that goes from the plains over to the gorges, maybe it might rely on a frickin' bridge that's out, so you can't pass through that right now. And then this one, maybe they're going over here. This one relies on a bridge that's also out, right? Or that requires you to have to cross a stream or something, go Oregon Trail and have to ford across a river on your wagon or something, right? I don't know. And then so the dotted ones are hidden. And so I think I made it work, right? You can get to every point of interest in a roundabout way. So this is what I did. So the instructions say to create loops, branching paths, dead ends, and shortcuts between points of interest. Some paths may be parts of a chain and tied to a particular terrain, such as a mountain pass or a river. Some paths are conditional, represented by a crossed line. So I just drew an X on those. So we got to do something with those. And some paths are hidden, represented by a dashed line. So yeah. So I just drew some paths on there. Looking back on this, I probably should have put some more thought into it, but it seems to be working. So then now we have to designate each path using the number of a point of interest and its connecting point, such as 1-3. Indicate this in your notebook under the originating point of interest or in a separate section. I elected to go with a separate section. So if I just started sort of writing out what the roads are, what the possible paths that players can take. So you can see I've got 5 that go from the heart, and then a few that go from the other points of interest, but everything is accessible. So pretty cool. And then decide whether a path represents a road, a trail, or a wilderness route, and write the results in your notebook. So at the time, I didn't know what the hell that meant. I was like, okay, I guess, from the heart to the echoing fields, it's just going to be a road. Probably going out to that floating fortress, it might just be a trail, so it's not as traveled. And then I was also kind of confused too, because the way that I did my map here, like say for example H2, right? So from the heart to the point of interest number 2. This road goes here, so this will be an actual road, but then maybe this branch of this road here is only a trail. So I wasn't sure what to do, so I just made the whole damn thing a trail. So that's my thought process there. Whether that's correct or not, I got no idea, but I rolled with it. And then wilderness. So you can see here, I just kind of made that here. I've got a few roads. Some of them I note that they're blocked. And then some are trails, and then there's one that's a wilderness path. So if we look back at our map from 6 to 8, so this one that goes all the way up to 8, this is all wilderness here. So yeah. Anyway, so I did that. Now, roll on the path features table for each path, writing the results in your notebook. Okay, so this is the path features table. So I did that. I just wrote it all down. So like from the heart to the first point of interest is a road. The feature that I rolled is follow the stars, and the condition is it's confusing to navigate, which is kind of interesting. So I just did that. I decided not to re-roll anything. I just went with it. So some of the things that were a bit of a head scratcher for me is, if you look at like from the heart to the second waypoint, which is that floating fortress, it's a trail. There's dead vegetation, and then it's overcrowded. Why is it overcrowded? What is it overcrowded with? Who knows, right? So this gives you these random things that you wouldn't have thought of. Some of them don't make sense immediately, but you can make it make sense, and it seems really, really cool, right? So from the heart to the third point of interest, I forgot what it was now, but it's in my notes, don't worry. Diseased animals and night predators. Okay, that sounds dangerous. From heart to 7, there's mineral flecks on the road, but it's also blood red, which is pretty intense. There's rusted tools and a steep climb from the heart to 8. Then the other ones, abandoned fields and frequent flash floods. That sounds dangerous. Cattle prints and poisonous fruit. The trail that goes from 6 to 7 is disappearing and has night predators. So that sounds like hell. And then going from 6 to 8 is wilderness. There's abandoned fields, which are divided by a political dispute, which I thought was interesting. Why would a wilderness trail that has abandoned fields be divided by a political dispute? Who knows? We'll figure that out, won't we? So, determine the path distances between the points of interest and note the duration on the map. Now, this gets into one of the other procedures. I forget what it's called. I think it's travel procedures. I could be wrong. So, a watch is 8 hours long. Denote days between points of interest wherever possible. Typically 2 watches and 1 rest per day of travel. A short distance between points of interest takes 1 watch to traverse, a medium distance takes 2 watches, and a long distance takes 3 watches. For trails, add 1 more watch, and for wilderness routes, add 2 additional watches. So, I know it said to put distances on my map, but it was already getting cluttered, and so I just sort of added to my road section here, because I'm gonna be referring to that anyway. So I just put it in my notes. And you can see I did that by denoting how many watches it's going to take. Not by days like it recommended, but watches. So from the heart to the echoing fields, it's only going to take 1 watch. It's pretty close by. From the heart to the floating fortress, it's going to take 3 watches. It was only going to take 2, but because it's a trail, you add 1, so it's 3. And you can see like the wilderness one is going to take 6 watches, so that's going to be a dangerous journey. So yeah, everything is like 1 watch, 3 watch, so it could take a day or 2, sometimes probably several days for that wilderness one, if they're not able to clear out these blocked roads. So yeah, like already this is nuts. This is way more detail than I would have ever put in something, and there's already like creative juices flowing on this stuff, which is just great. So now we get to put it all together. So this is where I start naming things and trying to tie it all together. In the Warden's Guide, you can actually find naming procedures on like page 116. But these questions are very, very important, and they help focus your imagination, and answering those questions will make everything much more cohesive, believable, and memorable, and immersive. So ask yourself the following questions. What would draw people to this region? What keeps them here? How do the people here think of outsiders? How do outsiders think of them? What power do the factions have over the people who live here? Who or what threatens their agendas? How would a faction interact with any newcomers, such as an adventuring party? How does the region's terrain and weather affect the people that live here? So you should now have a sufficient idea about the people and the terrain of this region, and your first region is now complete. To expand your realm, repeat the process as many times as you wish. Now, it says complete, but there are many things that aren't figured out yet. So, such as like, okay, I have 2 dungeons. What are those? There's world building later on. There's a whole section about dungeons, which I'm not going to get into today. That's going to be another video, because I've already been recording for an hour. I'm not even done yet. Yes. Okay, so the example that it gives here is, if my results described a people that were religious and sought conversion, I'd assume that they were a proud folk, prone to religious extremes and proselytizing. And if their primary resource was land, yet spices were rare, I'd assume that they grew their own food, but due to a religious prohibition, their cuisine was often bland. Presume that for a faction, the result was a group of nomads, with conviction their primary advantage. I could then assume that their elites were a class of religious chiefs. If the faction's agenda was to cultivate a rare resource, but they were hindered by cultural taboos, I might decide that they had hired a party to take on the task instead. Perhaps the object of their quest was a unique plant only grown in a distant place, and that the mission must remain a secret. Finally, the party would meet with one of the faction agents, a spy posing as a peddler. Only she could tell them where the plant grew and how to cultivate it. I keep in mind that this person should likely appear in an important place, such as the region's heart. So that just gives you an idea about how to tie it all together, but let's see how I did it, right? So this just kind of goes through, this goes on a side tangent about the naming stuff. So you can see here, to come up with a realm name, you roll on the ruler names formula table. So I rolled a 4. So adjective, rulers of the noun. There's tables for everything. Adjective, rulers, noun, all that stuff. So you can see here, I rolled a D100. And for the adjectives, I came up with gleaming. For the ruler type, 18, realm. And then for the noun, witch. So the gleaming realm of the witch. Now, as always, this if you're unhappy with the result, re-roll or modify, because the first 2 results I got made no sense. So imagine trying to have a serious campaign and the realm you start in is called the Grand Duchy of the Gaping Dirt, or the Chasm Soggy State, right? So these are not the be-all end-all, but to get your ideas going. So I decided my realm was going to be named the Gleaming Realm of the Witch. Who is the witch? No idea. I haven't got that far yet. I'm only focused on this one region in this realm so far. So I'm not going to bore you with the rest of the stuff, but I started kind of making names for everything. And so the realm, the gleaming realm of the witch, the region, I decided to call it the Frigid Shroud. And the reason why I did that is because for most of the place, it's going to be like cold, wet, like there's lots of precipitation except during the summer. So there's always like this shroud of just like a mist or like just rainfall. It's like I just imagine like if it was a video game, the render distance would probably not be too good, right? So the Frigid Shroud, that's what I called it. So then answering those questions, and I realized I forgot a question in this, but you know, I'm not perfect, whatever. So the first question was, what would draw people to this region? So since the people I rolled are wealthy, I would say the wealth, and the cold yet fertile climate of the region yields unique flora that is highly sought after for materials in various luxury textiles, which is the main export of the region, and also perhaps rare alchemical ingredients. So, bam, there's how that's one reason, and the second reason is like the mystery and curiosity. There are many inexplicable and seemingly impossible attractions in this region. Who built Turnwall Stronghold, which is what I named the heart. It's this rotating stronghold, right? Turnwall. The rotating heart of the region. Why is it small, like human-sized, and yet there's behemoth graveyards? Why are there remains of impossibly huge beings? How is there a floating fortress, right? There are tons of these things that could be tourist attractions, or it could just be it could draw like researchers, scholars, scientists, adventurers, right? So that's what draws people to the region for various reasons. Now, what keeps them here? The vast majority of the people reside in the heart of the region, Turnwall Stronghold, a place held by the common folk, because the people were, the faction I ruled was common folk. And yet the origins are unknown. It is the safest place in the entire Frigid Shroud region, and life is nice there for now. And then there's many reasons keeping people here. The wealth, the mystery of its origins, the safety the stronghold provides, the unity of commoners running the place, and the sense of freedom from not being oppressed by a ruling monarch. So this is kind of how I fleshed out my faction, like tying it all together, is that the faction, I should have put more information on the faction, but I kind of forgot. I think I called it was the something pact. I think it's in here, but basically it's a faction of common folk with like elected positions, but one of the traits was that they were secretive and they're also bankrupt. So I figured that their agendas and stuff kind of tie in later. So what power do the factions have over the people who live here? So the Storm Shroud Pact are the only known faction in the region comprised of common folk that are elected to their positions, and as such have the complete trust of the people. So that's how I tied that faction together, because one of their advantages was fealty. So I interpreted that as that the people trust them explicitly because the people are the ones who are electing them, right? However, the pact is secretive. Any dissidents are usually dealt with by the people. In reality, they are just pact agents who are among the people who help sway opinion and keep them in line, right? So they're secretive. They're also manipulative, right? So that's what power the Storm Shroud Pact has over the people who live here. Who or what threatens their agendas? So the public agenda of the pact is to maintain the peace and provide for the people. However, as the years come and go, the elected officials always seem to be re-elected, and their wealth growing more and more obvious. The pact has grown wealthy, and they wish to stay that way. However, greedy merchants and consortiums extort them. With little fuel for heat to be found in the cold climate, they're forced to import fuel at exorbitant prices. So when I rolled the region, their primary resource is textiles, which has made them wealthy, but their scarcity is fuel. And I interpreted that to be like heating fuel because it's a freaking cold ass region, right? So, boom. In addition, the people oppose their proposed means to amass more wealth. Magical ancient ruins yield magical heat sources. However, one exploded recently and people mistrust it and they don't want to use it anymore, right? So let's say the faction, the pact is trying to amass more wealth by not having to deal with these stupid ass greedy merchants and consortiums that they keep having to import fuel. What if they had their own source of fuel? There's nothing stopping them from being rich, right? So I would imagine that throughout these various curiosities and like ruins and stuff like that, there could be a magical means of like fuel sources. However, the people mistrust them because one of them exploded and caused quite a few casualties, and now nobody wants them, and they want the real deal. And they're since the pact is the people who are basically running the place, and the people rely on them, and they are elected officials, right? You see how I'm kind of tying this all together and making it like a living, breathing, believable world? That's awesome. How would a faction interact with any newcomers, such as an adventuring party? I would say the pact would probably interact with them with eager interest to secretly do what they publicly cannot, to retrieve ancient magical heat sources, perhaps even try to persuade adventurers to harvest fuel from a forest, or ask them to find dirt on the merchants extorting them or of their wealth so that they can perhaps get a major discount for their silence. So these merchants and consortiums who were charging them crazy rates for their fuel, what if the players have to like dig up some dirt so that they can blackmail them, right? So it's like, hey, you're charging me a lot of money for this stuff right now, but I know you slept with that one guy's wife, and oh my gosh, it'd be embarrassing if that ever got out. Man, I wonder if we can come to some sort of agreement here, right? So that could be something, right? However, newcomers who are not in line with their agenda may find themselves surrounded by an unfriendly populace, perhaps even with falsified accusations. Because again, remember, one of the advantages of this faction was fealty of the people. And so since the people are the common folk, they're everywhere, right? So if you're not down with the pact, well, let's just say maybe you might start having some problems. Maybe you might even get false accusations. Maybe they might try to put you in prison or put you away if you because it's like, if you're not with us, you're against us kind of thing, right? So there you go. How does the region's terrain or weather affect the people that live there? It's freaking cold, miserable, dangerous, and magical. So people are venturing out less and less, which means they're not gathering as much valuable flora, which means they export less goods, which means they accrue less wealth, right? Maybe that's how it's affecting their stuff. Most of the population has naturally found themselves in Turnwall Stronghold, which can lead to overcrowding and dissent. So those are some factors that can definitely influence people. Like if it's just extra shitty out there, people aren't going to want to go out. That's probably why there's no other settlements around there, because this place is a shithole. It's cold. It sucks all the time. It's remote. There's like lots of danger. There's like carnivorous plants and like night predators and stuff out there. Who the hell wants to live out there, right? So these are the things that can make all this happen. And so maybe Turnwall Stronghold is, yes, it's the heart of the region, but it's also the only settlement that I rolled. So overcrowding can be a problem. And then you start having lots of issues, which can breed dissent. And yeah, all sorts of stuff can happen there. So there's lots of different story threads I can pick up there and weave those into a nice, cool fiction, right? And there you go. World building. Also, don't forget about Kettlewrite, which is the online tool that you can use for 2nd edition. So all this stuff that I just did, you can do with a click of a button. You don't have to spend an hour and 10 minutes making your own world, but I highly recommend you do it. This could probably cut it down to about 20 minutes. So I can just go to realm and then I click it and it gives me a realm, the Grizzled Confederation. It gives me what the people are. It gives me some factions. And then I think it also gives me the terrain and stuff if I scroll down more. I highly recommend doing it by the book so you know what it's doing and you kind of know what it's wanting you to do. And as you're doing it on the fly, it's a lot easier to just change things. And plus, I like rolling dice. You know, clicking a button's cool and everything. I'm glad it's here. But there is something to be said for that tactile feel of just rolling dice. So what are my thoughts on this? Because I think this is the last slide. I thought the process was pretty cool. There were a few confusing things on there, like you know, how the example in the book already had like an agent defined, but it didn't provide me with anything on how to define an agent. I still haven't found that yet. So that's kind of weird. And some of the map instructions seemed unintuitive, especially like drawing the paths and stuff like that. But once I just buckled down and did it, it made sense. And I might not have done it right, but I did it in a way that made sense for me. And either way, the net result is that I was able to pretty quickly just roll on some tables and build a world that I would have probably never thought of on my own. That makes a lot more sense. That just gives us a lot of interesting things for the players to explore, interesting scenarios for the players to overcome. Even the faction I rolled, which I didn't think was going to be pretty cool, I'm actually pretty pumped about it. I'm excited about it now. And I'm looking forward to it. And I'm going to be using this region as probably the starting area on one of these campaigns I'm going to do. So, yeah, really cool. Anyway, a long video. I'm sorry for being so long. This is going to be an uncut video. I hate editing videos. That's why I go through and I prepare these freaking slideshows so I can just run through it in one take. But yeah, hopefully this kind of, if you're not sure, kind of reading through it, hopefully this helps. Hopefully it's at the very least interesting, and I hope it sparks some ideas in your own gameplay, right? So anyway, that's all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for watching and listening to me ramble. And I'll see you in whatever video I make next. And I've got lots of cool content planned.